Unit 6 is a big old giant monster unit. It goes from 1900 all the way to 1945. Okay, so I'm dividing that. That's too big. It's otherwise you're going to go a whole month without a test. So I have the questions divided. So I have it from 1900 to 1929, which covers like 150 questions in the multiple choice, and then from 1929 to 1945 is like 80 questions. So we're going to do a full size test this Wednesday, that you are going to do, and then and then we'll do like a smaller test in like 2 weeks. Cool, like a half size test.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, so that means you have a um, study guide due on Thursday or on Wednesday. Study guide due on Wednesday
Okay.
that you're going to want to do, and then there's a discussion. The discussion is shorter than a lot of the other ones have been. It's only like 4 pages. So cool.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good.
So let's knock out the 1920s real quick. All right. So the 1920s. Hold on. I gotta spit my gum out. I can't talk. All right. So the 1920s is known for the Roaring Twenties. Okay, so this is a time period of economic growth for the United States. It's an economic growth. It's a time for like stability. It's a time for happiness after the end of the war, right? It's a time for kind of cultural change and stuff, where things are hip and cool, and kind of culture is starting to change a little bit. Okay, the economic advantage comes in the form of a couple things. Okay, so number one, so this is the economic boom of the 20s. Number one, we have a massive industrial output. Thanks to the war, we have lots of factories and they're all working, right? And so they just stop making war stuff and start making consumer goods. So an increased industrial output results in cheaper goods, cheaper consumer goods. Okay?
Okay.
So that's our first one. Cheaper consumer goods because of a large industrial output. Number two, Europe has been destroyed, right? And so we don't have a lot of international competition for our stuff. Okay, so
Mhm.
Europeans are buying our stuff because they can't build their own because their stuff was destroyed. Okay, number three, um, the United States has a lot of cheap credit and cheap debt. This is the first time in American history where Americans are going to start taking on debt to buy consumer things. This will be the birth of things like car loans and home loans and stuff. Americans had never previously, up until this point, had never really incurred debt like that before. And so now they are doing it in the 1920s. Okay, this is also going to be the invention of credit cards, of like credit card debt. Though they don't have card readers or anything like that yet, it's mostly like a credit account that you would have, with a company where you would have like a number and then they would credit to your account and you'd have to pay it down, right? It it is what today we would call credit cards.
Okay.
So a lot of Americans are buying cheap stuff and they're buying it on debt. Also, a lot of Americans are buying stocks for the first time. Stock market is booming for the first time ever, right? Previously, the stock market really had only been just a couple of rich people doing it. But now, for the very first time, you're going to start getting more regular Americans doing it. Last but not least, the United States is home to a lot of cheap labor. Cheap labor. Okay. Who's doing the cheap labor, Eric?
Um, the immigrants.
Okay. Immigrants are going to be the number one form of cheap labor, right? At this point in time, the United States is about 25% foreign born. Okay. So it's the biggest ever. So cheap immigrants and also African Americans.
Right.
Immigrants and African Americans are doing all the cheap work. Okay. So let's do the next big number here. The next big number, let's go with the Great Migration. So let's talk African Americans. Okay. So the Great Migration, so this is your next big number. It should be X, I think, something like that.
Okay.
Whatever your numbers are.
Yeah.
All right. So the Great Migration. The Great Migration is the time period from the 1910s to the 1930s where a large population of African Americans moved out of the South to the cities of the North for the first time. It's where a large population of African Americans for the very first time moved away from the South. For the first time ever, the northern cities are going to have a significant Black population. We're talking New York, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit. New York, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Philadelphia.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to get about 2 million African Americans moving during this time period, which is roughly the size of New York City. Okay, to give you an idea of scale, right? You may not feel like 2 million is that big of a number, right? But it's a pretty big number. It's a pretty big number. New York at this time is about 2 million. So it gives you an idea. Okay. Now, what would you expect with this many? So for the first time ever, the Negro problem is a problem in the North and the South, right? So all up until this point, the North has been able to mostly ignore African Americans, and they mostly just say that's a Southern problem, right? That's a Southern problem because that's where all the blacks live. New York and Philadelphia and stuff, they had African Americans populations, but they never had a really big population, right? New York had like 1% Black people, but now New York has like 10 to 15% Black people, right? Like Baltimore, Maryland had about 30% Black, and now Baltimore, Maryland's like 60% Black, right? So it's a big shift. So what do you expect to start showing its face? What do you expect to start showing up in the North?
A lot of racism.
Yeah. For the first time, you're going to start getting racial violence, right? Remember, this is the nadir period. So we're going to get an increase in lynching and an increase in racial violence. One of the worst examples of this, so violence is going to start breaking out across the country attached to this migration. One of the worst examples is what we call the Red Summer. The Red Summer is 1919. 1919, the Red Summer. And this map shows you all of the different race riots in the country that happened. And let's be clear, when we're talking about race riots, we're talking about groups of white people attacking Black people. I don't want you to get it twisted and think it's the other way around, because it's not. Okay. The worst one is Chicago. Chicago has a race riot that lasts for about a week. It kills 38 people, leaves 2,000 homeless. Okay. But there's dozens and dozens of these riots that break out across the entire country over 1919.
Okay.
Okay. Probably the worst one to happen in the entire time period is what we call the Tulsa Race Massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Go ahead and keep this in the same number. This is the worst race massacre in American history. It starts with a boy named Dick Rowland. So Dick Rowland is about a 15-year-old boy, and he's a delivery boy, and he works in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, Tulsa, Oklahoma had a huge booming Black population. It had a big oil boom. They had discovered oil, and they needed a bunch of labor and workers to work the oil fields. And so immigrants aren't moving all the way into Oklahoma, right? Immigrants are mostly in the northern cities. But this is attracting Black people coming up from Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, right? So African Americans are making their way up to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Tulsa, Oklahoma is home to one of the wealthiest Black populations in the country at the time. And it was so wealthy that they called it Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street. So Dick Rowland is the young boy. He's a delivery boy. and he goes to the city hall and he delivers some packages to the city hall, and then he has to go use the bathroom. But he has to use the segregated bathroom. So the only segregated bathroom in the building is on the second floor, all the way on the other side of the building. So he goes up the stairs, he goes over to use the bathroom, right? And then on his way back, allegedly, he sexually assaults a woman, sexually assaults a girl in the stairway. I think you know where this is going already, right? Right. Well,
Yeah.
she screams out that he tried to rape her, um, and so he gets arrested. Once he's arrested, a group of black men show up at the city hall with guns. Now, Eric, what are the black men doing there? What do you
Mm,
what do you think they're doing there?
are they hanging
Hmm?
in like the pictures or?
No, no, no. In the story. In the story. What are the black men doing? A group of black men, about 30 black men, show up with guns after
Oh,
Dick Rowland is arrested.
they protect him
Protect him how?
by um taking over the government, I guess. I don't know.
No. Nope.
No.
They're not there to start a fight. They're there to make sure that he survives to see a trial date, right?
Okay.
You have to think about lynchings. What happens to black men who are accused of sexual violence?
They will get lynched.
They get lynched, right? They get taken out of the prison by the cops and they get murdered, right? And so the
Hmm.
black population isn't stupid. They know this is going to happen. And so they are there to make sure that Dick Rowland is still in the cell on Monday when the judge is going to talk to them, right? Well, this produces a backlash. Whites show up with guns at the Capitol, at the city hall, right? But a larger group of whites go into the black neighborhoods and start lighting all the houses on fire. They start to burn the entire city down. They start to rape and murder their way through Black Wall Street. It gets so bad that a group of white KKK members, they go to a nearby army base, they steal army planes, and they fly the army planes over Tulsa and drop bombs on the black neighborhoods. American soil has only ever been aerial bombarded twice. This KKK fighting Tulsa, fighting the black population of Tulsa, and Pearl Harbor. The result is the result of this massacre is that about 1,000 black people get killed. We don't have an exact number, but it's somewhere around 1,000. Around 1,000 black people get killed. Around 6,000 black men get arrested and blamed for the violence. About 2,000 people are made homeless. So what about Dick Rowland? Dick Rowland survives. He's in jail during this entire time. Dick Rowland gets brought. He gets brought in front of. The judge, and the judge is hearing the case. And the girl who accused him, she says, "I didn't mean anything by it. I was just messing with him. It was fake. He did not assault her." The judge lets him go, and Dick Rowland just walks north because he knows he can't go into Tulsa. He's going to be killed, right? He'll be lynched. He'll be killed. So he just walks north. Now we know that 40 years later, a black magazine is going to track him down, and they will find him, right? An African American magazine. They'll find him and they interview him. And he moved up to Missouri. He got married. He had kids. He changed his name, right? The black magazine keeps him anonymous. They don't say where They don't say what town he's in. They don't say what his name is, right? Because he's still in danger. But he, at least he gets a happy ending or something close to a happy ending, you know. Anyway, there are a lot of these kinds of massacres. This is the worst one. This is the worst one, but I want you to understand that there's one or two of these every single year. Okay, during this time period, one or two of these mass killings where it's 100+ people killed. Okay, this is one consequence of the Great Migration. The other consequence of the Great Migration is what we call the Harlem Renaissance. So African Americans moved up to the big cities. And once they moved up to the big cities and there was riots and stuff, the African Americans were forced to live in one section of the city, the black part of the city. In the case of New York, the blacks were forced to live in Harlem. So Harlem, New York, is going to become one of the most vibrant populations of African Americans in the entire country. And it's going to be this revival of Black culture, this revival of this African American culture, and it's going to be led by the invention of two new things. Okay, blues and jazz and blues. So they're both forms of music. They're both forms of music. They both come from the South, but they've gained popularity in the North. So jazz comes from New Orleans. Jazz comes from New Orleans, and blues comes from Memphis, Tennessee. And but they become popular in Harlem. Harlem is going to become this kind of gathering place for Black authors and writers and poets and musicians, and eventually, people are going to be in movies and TV shows. Eventually, what TV is going to get invented pretty soon, right? That this is this center of Black culture, and it's going to produce all these things. Okay. Here's some examples of some of the people here. Some of these big names. All right, so that's good for this. Let's do the changing role of women. So make this a new number. Sorry, I'm going fast, but we're behind, right? Your class, because you missed Martin Luther King Day and President's Day and a snow day, right? Like, it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
It's a problem. So I'm trying to go fast. All right, so the 1920s is also known for the changing role of women. Okay, women have the vote in 1920. They get the 19th Amendment, so they start to vote. And now that women are voting, women are going to be stepping out into culture in something close to equality. So women start to cut their dresses short. They start going out in shorter skirts. Women start cutting their hair. It becomes a height of fashion to wear your hair short. And they start going public drinking and smoking and dancing, right? And that this is a big, huge leap forward for women in society, that women are stepping out in a way that they've never stepped out before. And to get you an idea here, it was illegal for women to cut their hair. It was illegal for women to show their legs. It was illegal for women to smoke, right? These things were all illegal at the time, but the women of the 1920s just start doing it anyway, right? And eventually what happens is society just kind of accepts the change, because so many women are doing it. That they can't, what are they gonna do? Arrest all of the women of New York, right? Like, it ends up just becoming the new reality. In addition to that, women are also for the first time getting the right to divorce. So women can escape a bad marriage and escape an abusive marriage, or just a marriage that they don't love each other, for the first time ever. With the changing role of women, we're going to start getting women stepping into more masculine fields, right? This is where we're going to get the rise of Amelia Earhart, the flying daredevil, where she, flies. She's the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. She's the first woman to, make all these big flight records and things, right? She's the most famous one, but my personal favorite is Lillian LaFrance. Lillian LaFrance is a woman from like Nebraska, I think, and she invents the wheel of death. Right? Have you ever seen this in like carnivals? You know, the big steel cage where they're riding motorcycles and they're going around the top, right? And they're using centrifugal force to drive all the way up. You know what I'm talking about, right? She invents the wheel of death, and she's like driving motorcycles and stuff through there. This is her driving a car with a lion in it, right? As a daredevil. She's not going to be on the test, but she's like one of my favorites. I like her a lot. She also popularizes the use of the skull and crossbones as fashion. She sews it onto the front of her on the front of her shirt, and she's wearing this, right? The other big change for women is the birth control movement. The birth control movement is going to get started in the 1920s, and it gets started by Margaret Sanger, this woman, Margaret Sanger. Sanger makes an argument that women can never, ever be equal until they solve the problem of sex, right? I can make women politically equal. I can make them economically equal. I can make them, socially equal. I can pass laws to make all these things equal, right? It's possible anyway. But I can't escape the basic biology that a man and a woman can have sex and the man can walk away and never think about it again. Where the woman, there's always a chance that she produces a baby. There's always a chance that she will be pregnant. And that means that she can never be equal because she can't have sex for fun. She can never have sex without consequence. Margaret Sanger in the 1920s is viewed as a crackpot, right? They think of her as a nut, as this crazy lady who wants to talk about sex, right? And the whole country is like, oh my God, right? Nobody will publish her. She ends up making her own newspaper, the Birth Control Review, where she's publishing articles about birth control. She also founds the organization Planned Parenthood, which is the largest women's health organization in the planet Earth. Now, birth control is not going to be invented yet, right? Scientists are going to be working on it. It will be invented in the 1960s, but Margaret Sanger is kind of laying the groundwork now. Okay. All right. So we've talked about the changing role of women. We talked about African Americans and the Great Migration and the change of African Americans. We have to talk about economics a little bit. Okay. So President Coolidge and President Harding. Here's our presidents. Where is he? Come on now. Here's Harding. President Harding is one of our worst presidents of all time. He is deeply, deeply, deeply corrupt. He is possibly the most corrupt president we've ever had. Stole all sorts of money. He gave all sorts of government contracts to his friends and his buddies. He slept around on his wife. He abused his power. He was a terrible. He's one of almost universally recognized as one of the worst presidents. Okay. He also dies in office. He ends up having an aneurysm and dies in office. He's followed by Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge, who also is not that great of a president. Calvin Coolidge is mostly known for doing nothing because he did nothing. They both believe in something called laissez-faire economics. This is definitely 100% a term you need. Laissez-faire economics. Okay, it's a French term. It's a French term to mean let it go. What this means is that the government has no interference or as little interference as possible with the economy. The government doesn't solve labor disputes. It doesn't regulate the businesses. It doesn't stop, monopolies. It just is hands off. They believed that the best economics is an economics where capitalism is just free to do whatever it wants. Okay. And Harding and Coolidge both believed that. And so they basically did nothing, basically. Right. So we're coming off, this is like we talked about that pendulum swinging back and forth between conservative and liberal, right? Well, the previous era had a lot of liberal economics. It has like Franklin or Teddy Roosevelt, busting up trusts, Teddy Roosevelt supporting regulations, supporting labor groups, right? Like regulations after the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, a lot of that kind of stuff, right? And then the other side of it over here is this laissez-faire economics. So the 19 teens is all about interference. The 1920s is all about laissez-faire. Okay. One of the last things that we need to deal with here is prohibition. So this is our last topic. I'm sorry that we're doing a whole bunch, but we got to do it. All right. So the last one is prohibition. So alcohol was made illegal in the 18th Amendment in 1920. And the 18th Amendment made alcohol illegal. It prohibited the production, transport, and sale of alcohol. Now, this is going to go down as one of the greatest failures in the American government. Okay. It's a huge failure for a couple of reasons. Okay. First, there's a bunch of exceptions to the law. Okay. There's a religious exception because Catholics drink wine in church. Okay. There's also a religious exemption for Jews who drink wine with some of their ceremonies as well. Right. So there's a religious exception for Catholics and Jews. There's also a doctor's exception that the doctor can prescribe alcohol. Alcohol was commonly prescribed for all sorts of things, including it's the number one prescription for pregnancy, for pregnant women. For pregnant women who are feeling pains and feeling discomfort, it's prescribed that they drink alcohol so they feel better. You're shaking your head like you don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, that's because, Eric, you are not a cutting edge doctor of the 1920s, sir, right? So
True.
you just take your non doctor self and you just back off.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the number one prescription for pregnant women at the time. Um, so reason it failed, number one, is these exceptions. Reason it failed, number two, is that alcohol is super easy to make at home. Like everyone can make it. In fact, people accidentally make it all the time. Right? If you leave any kind of vegetable, really, any kind of vegetable, any kind of fruit or vegetable, and you just leave it in the sun, like in a jar with water in the sun and some yeast, you're going to make alcohol in like a day. Right? So alcohol's super, super easy to make, especially for farmers. Okay. In fact, most farmers just make their own alcohol anyway. Okay. So, one, there's a lot of exceptions. Two, it's easy to make. Three, and here's the big one, and I don't want you to underestimate this one, people like to drink. People like it. And so they just like to drink. They like to go to parties. They like to drink. They just like it. Right? Humans have been drinking alcohol since like 10,000 BCE. Right? We've been drinking alcohol at this point for 12,000 years. They like it. Right? And so this law is profoundly unpopular. Profoundly unpopular. And the result is that alcohol consumption is going to go up. They make it illegal. And so, of course, everyone says, I'm going to start drinking because you tell me I can't do it. And so they do. So alcohol goes up. We have a couple of vocab words that you need. The first vocab word you need is a speakeasy, right here.
Okay.
A speakeasy is an illegal bar. It's an illegal underground bar. And these are usually bars that are like disguised to look like something else. Like they're disguised to look like a store, like a grocery store or something, or, like a little corner market or something like that. So it's a speakeasy, okay, an illegal bar. And a bootlegger is somebody who illegally creates and transports alcohol. This is a good example here, right? This truck, it looks like it's hauling lumber, but you take the end out and you find that it's completely hollow on the inside, and they would just fill it up with bottles of liquor.
Hmm.
Okay. This becomes extremely popular in two parts of the country. One, Florida, right? Because all these ships are coming up from the Caribbean. And as these ships come up from the Caribbean, they're all bringing like rum from the Caribbean, from Cuba, from Puerto Rico, from Dominican Republic. All these ships are coming up bringing rum. Okay. So that's one. And then two, along the Canadian border, because Canada still makes all sorts of alcohol. In fact, Canadian alcohol production increases by like 600% because all these Americans are buying Canadian liquor. The other consequence here is that it produces organized crime. This is the birth of the mafia. As the mafia starts to illegally traffic in alcohol. As it turns out, when you take a really popular item and make it illegal, people are willing to pay a lot of money to anyone to get it, right? And so criminals and the mafia basically buy all this alcohol. The most famous one is going to be Al Capone. He's the guy in the picture here. He's going to be the mob boss in charge of Chicago. And he basically owns the city of Chicago for this whole decade. He is going to rule Chicago with murder, with murder and with crime, and the worst case of this is going to be the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, where on Valentine's Day he just murders a whole bunch of people. He murders like a dozen people out in the open, right? And he can't get arrested. The cops can't stop him at all. Al Capone's the one who controls most of Chicago. Lucky Luciano is the one who controls most of New York. And these crime bosses are going to basically run this place. Organized crime becomes huge business. Okay? That's really what you need for the 1920s. Okay? There's some other stuff, you know, the birth of Hollywood. Hollywood is rising up, right? There's some other changing literature and stuff. There's conflict with religion. They're going to go to court over whether or not you can teach evolution in court, in schools and stuff, right? So there's a lot of other things. You can look at them in your book if you want to, but I'm going to stop here. I've kind of given you the minimum that you need, the minimum stuff that you need. So this is good. Okay.
All right.
Do your study guide. I strongly recommend that if you did not read the chapters last week for the discussion, that you do read the chapters this week. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Do you have any questions or problems or comments?
Nope.
Okay. On Wednesday, I would like you to take the test on Wednesday at some point. I probably won't even have a code on it. I'll probably just leave it without a code for the first time, right?
Okay.
And then I'll just put a code on it for retakes. Cool.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. I'll see you later.
All right. Thank you.